Welcome back, everybody. It is time for Ren Week 7. We're nearing the end, actually, of Puppy Bootcamp. We're kind of almost wrapped up. So it's just a case of adding some extra new little fresh, snazzly behaviours over the next couple of weeks and beginning to prepare for our next gigantic event, which is the enormous one of the photography show. So if you come in, then say hi. I'll include some information all about that in the description below. But if you're new here, please do go and watch week 1 of Ren Diaries, where you'll learn exactly why you should not get this breed of dog. Don't do it to yourself. And hopefully the warning that's been on these all the way through makes everybody in the community happy, because it was something that was requested. So we're off to do some important things this week. Basically, a lot of them relate to behaviours around Bryt / behaviours around very busy dogs. It seems to only be Bryt. Ren and Bryt are like absolute best friends, even though they spend very little time together, which we think is actually potentially part of the problem, because they spend so little time together that it almost builds that I don't know, it makes it more special when they are together, and it makes that even more rewarding. So the whole focus of this week was to basically work on that addiction that Ren has to Beanie. Now, when Beanie's working, she's exactly the same as all of our other dogs, where she doesn't pay any attention to anyone else, which is where Ren will get to. But all dogs are different. All of my own dogs are different as well. So we basically work with whatever the dog gives us, and we work from there. So here we're working on essentially having a look at Bryt, who's over there quite boring and stationary, but she will start to move, and then checking back in with the handler. And if we're struggling because the dog is super focused and a little bit over fixated, then I will sometimes tap the dog's head, as long as I know that they're obviously okay with that and Ren's fine, just to kind of break that fixation and then reward back up with me. And over time, that builds a positive association with essentially, oh, look, something exciting's happening. But at the same time, oh, hey, mum's there, and that was more rewarding. So the whole purpose of this isn't to feed for them looking at something. It's to get to the point where they look at something that's interesting to them and then immediately look straight back up at the handler. And that's the aim of the game. So it's just a process. It's called counter conditioning, and it's quite effective. So here we started the situation. If you go right back when I was yabbering on, you'll see that she was hyper focused on Beanie. At this stage now, Bryt's moving much closer, and although Ren is interested, she isn't pulling to the end of the leash. She's got slack there, and she's still able to disengage, refocus on me as the handler, and get the reward whilst Beanie's doing the most amazing sit stay. And what I'm doing is I'll say something fairly quietly to Dan to say, okay, you can release, and then Dan will release her up forwards. So we're sort of in concert, we're talking to each other as we're moving through, but I need to make sure that when I say something to Dan, that Ren doesn't learn that that's a cue that something exciting is going to happen. So it is a tricky balance, but this session went really well. She ended up not really being that interested in Bryt. She still is obviously interested, but you'll see over the coming sessions how that evolves. And then we also do toy play whilst there is dogs around. It's usually, especially if we've built that toy drive or the dog has an innate toy drive, it's usually far easier to go ahead and utilize that toy drive to pull them off of something that they're excited about. So this is sort of baby steps for that. You saw that she was not that interested in dogs everywhere else that we've been, so it literally is a Bryt problem. It's an us problem, and it's something that we're aware of and we're chipping away at. And at the time of me recording this, which is basically the end of the next week, the end of the puppy graduation ceremony, essentially, then the situation is completely resolved. So we'll watch that work through, but first we need to go through and kind of instill some basic bits and pieces. It's very difficult for me when I come and do the voiceovers, because I'm like 2 weeks ahead, and I'm like, why is she not as amazing as she is right now? And it's because obviously we're like operating in the past. So all we're looking at here is starting to just bring that rotation into the heel position, as it were, by not doing so much of a lure with the food. So we're beginning to slowly fade out the hand target, but as you can see, we're not there yet, and that's okay. So that's something that you'll see develop really, really, really strongly this week, to the point where I believe it's faded out completely at the end of this episode. So we'll see that progress. We'll switch it up with unders, closes, middles, and then back into that position. And then in the next week, you'll see me add a new behavior at the feet, which ties it all up together. So then you can run sequences through with multiple different commands around your legs. And it's really great for working them out and about in busier environments, and just pulling her there into the close position from behind my leg. So it's starting to add difficulty this week. And what we'll also start to do is we'll start to add some distances involved and then some distractions. So here we are again next day from Bryt's distraction training, doing another distraction training session. So I've got Ren with me. Alfie's on the chair. He's 10 years old this year. He's a dab hand at this, so this is all basic boring stuff for him. Beanie is on our sofa chair, which is to the left-hand side of the screen, so you can just see the shadow of Dan. Dan's there with Beanie, and he's doing some work with Bean. The reason why Bryt is particularly distracting for all dogs is because she's a working Cocker Spaniel. She's very, very busy. She moves super fast, really low to the floor, and she usually makes some noise doing that. So it's really difficult. She's actually a really great distraction because she's so distracting. But like I said, when she's working, she'll ignore everything, and that gives us these prime opportunities. So she's having her tea fed in a training session with Dan, and I'm literally just training Ren as normal in this environment, including going quite close to Alfie, and also, actually, to be fair, quite close to Bryt at times. So again, I'm doing things in these first sessions that she knows really well. So I'm not trying to add complexity because I've already added one of the Ds. So if you remember Puppy Diaries week 1, so all the way back in 2020 or early 2021, you'll have seen me talk about the 3 Ds, which are distance, duration, and distractions. We add one at a time. So we've added distractions. I'm not going to add new behaviors or anything else like that. So we've upped the ante there. Bryt was on the sofa chair. Now she's doing a lured wiggle across the floor. So those things will increase. So she's doing recourse to Dan across the floor, but we're also making her a little bit more busy, a little bit more distracting. But if you notice that Ren then checked back in without my prompt on where she sat in that sit, and she's not on leash in this situation, so she could just go and run to Beanie. I just tapped her head there because I don't want to break that fixation a little bit. But her fixation at this stage is not problematic at all. It's just interesting. And she's maybe, I don't know, I can't even remember, I can't do the maths, 13, 14 weeks old at this stage. I'm not expecting her to completely ignore another dog wiggling around everywhere, moving really quickly, jumping on and off furniture. That's unreasonable. But what I am expecting is for her to hold her training and also still focus and check in on me. And that's what she's doing. So she's doing really, really, really good in this session. And Bryt's getting even more animated. Alfie's like, why are we doing this? You're all boring as hell. Why aren't we doing something fun, like running, like training, like going through a forest? But yeah, bless Alf. He's a very good stooge dog to have handy. And realistically at this stage, I'm just super happy with Remba. She's done really great in that session, so she can get her release cue. I do guide her over to the other side so she doesn't go back, but then we're back for another training session. So next morning, I'm having a chat to myself. You do have to remember with my attire for these sessions that this is the same week that we lost Finn. So Ren Diaries weeks don't start on Mondays. We lost Finn on a Monday. So we're still in Ren Diaries weeks here, and not that far through the week either. So I'm just doing the best I can do really in this situation. And what I'm wanting to work on in this session a little bit was that glue stick to the leg, which she did really well. So we're just working on a little bit faster moving into positions. And then what I'm still helping her with is a slight rotation around the head to keep her back end close. But you'll see that fade as well, to the point where I don't even have a hand down. I can stand up and just move, and she'll be attached to my leg like a piece of Velcro, which is the end goal. So although watching all of these Ren diaries, it's lots of like broken steps, which are quite hard to follow. But then when it all kind of comes together at the end, you'll be like, that makes sense now. And so that's all we're doing here. So this day that we're on right now, this is just before I filmed Finn's little tribute video, which went on YouTube. So this is the same day that was filmed. So that gives you a little bit of a timeline almost in terms of kind of like when things are happening. And I knew I had to film that video today, so I just kept things simple. So after that was filmed, I got back into my jammies and we started to just work on some simple bits. So start with some hand touches, which just gets her nice and engaged. But I'm doing switching direction hand touches, which is important for what we're going to add next week, because that means that I can change the positioning of her body, so the angle of her body. Because if her nose comes, her back end usually will follow, which means then that I can start to chain behaviours together, one after the other, to give minute positioning for photography, which, I mean, it's what you're here for, probably. Who knows? So just working on that right behaviour that Dan introduced when I was away last week as well. And throughout these sessions, what we'll do is we'll just start to build on those until we somewhat fade out the hand cue. The hand cue will probably stay there for a few more months, to be honest. But it's something that will fade out quite drastically over the next few sessions. So I'm still sort of catching her and running a spin. That will go. So I stopped her then. She was going to go for a close and I asked for a foos. So I prevented her rehearsing a behaviour. So if you don't want a behaviour, don't let it rehearse. So stop that before she went round and wrapped around the back and then repositioned her so she chose the correct behaviour. It's hard for her because her commands for close is close, and her command for her heel position where she comes in and switches round, this one, that's foos. So foos and close sound really, really similar. So the way I say it has to be slightly different just to help her out a little bit at this stage, because they both end in the same place, and that's quite a difficult thing for the puppy to kind of work out. So close and foos are really, really similar. Right and flat can be similar. So again, it's how you say it. So I always say flat, which is a bit weird, but it works in principle. All right. So I'm asked for an under without much of a hand cue. So I'm just fading off all of the little training wheels. That's all we're doing in this session. We're fading training wheels and we're adding new behaviours as well over the top. So no training wheels were on that one. I looked with my head, which is the only one. And then this training wheel is still on because we're still very new to this. So we still have the training wheel. And then if we wanted to try some sideways, I've got training wheels there, but fading that handler up now so that it's not an open food hand. Then Dan took little Rembo again for his clearing of the head, and on this occasion it was snowing. Well, it was kind of sleeting. I mean, it was a bit snowy. It was the Finn came home in the snow. I remember that. So I think these guys must have gone out just afterwards. The snow didn't settle, but it's still very much there and it all melted. So Ren is out in precipitation and there's puddles. Both of those things aren't Ren's favourite things, right? She doesn't like being wet. She doesn't like going through puddles if she's on a lead, but she's quite happy to like plough through them if she's off lead. So she's off up to the little playing field in a local village that we live close to. And this is what these guys do there. So they need to get over the quagmire that exists at the start of the field, this really muddy stretch, which she doesn't mind the mud whatsoever. That's fine. But she really doesn't like rain falling on her head or her back. So they just spend their time working on things like recalls, having a little bit of a leg stretch. And then Dan's also been chaining behaviours as well, which is things like a recall to a sit and then the reward, or a recall to a close and then a reward. And I think we see the first recall to a close here as well. And that's something that will build up over time. So, oh, wow. Close. So he had to repeat the command then, which he knows isn't a good thing. So they will have repeated that to make sure that it can be done without having that repeated command. And then lots of just little recall bits. So she's allowed to go sniff, but then when Dan says, hey, come back, she does. And then taking a harness off, you can see that she's a bit soggy. And the first thing that she does is she's just like, actually, I don't like it. I don't like it. And then we went out in the rain again because now it's actual raining. I need to have my hair cut because I've not had my hair cut in like a year, and I really do need a haircut. So I booked in last minute for an evening session at my hairdresser's, and so we thought, oh well, why don't we bring Ren down, because my hairdresser's is on the marina in Hull. It's called ACDC, which I really enjoy that. So we took her out down here, raining, people, it's dark. All of these are kind of newish variables. And she was really struggling, to be honest. She didn't she just wasn't 100% engaged with me. So we just worked on some super, super, super simple things. I'm not asking for a lot, but the rain is something that we clearly needed to work through. So since then, Dan's gone out almost every time it's rained with her, and now she's a dead pro. But these are all the things that we're learning. So we're not like, oh, she was naughty. She wasn't naughty. She just struggled a little bit more in this environment. Why? It could be because it's dark. It could be because it's raining. So those are the things that we're going to work on next time. And then moving back into life skills, this is me and Ren in the morning, so I'll be quiet to let you listen to her playing with her toy. All the emotions put in. Yeah. Those of you with vocal dog breeds will know that nothing in this video is problematic in the slightest. But just in case you were worrying, she's fine. There's no resource guarding. Do you like shouting? So life skills for us, we need the dogs to be able to settle and not just in a box. So our dogs live with us and they need to be able to go into different environments and settle down. So we have Red up sometimes early in the mornings or on the evenings, and she has her toys she's allowed to eat, which are not meat related, and then she'll just go to sleep. And then we headed out to Beverley Market again. So if you remember from last week, Dan went to the market by himself. And when he rang me after he was on the way home from that session, he said, I think you might need to come with me for next time, because it didn't go, it was just a bit overwhelming, I think, for Dan, and also obviously, for Ren as well, because they weren't expecting it to be so busy and how to get out of some of those tricky situations. So I came with her, and you can see her loose lead walk here. And just because you're coming up to a sticky point doesn't mean that you can lax off on the criteria. So just because she knows she's supposed to have a loose lead, so she can't pull just because we're going into like a busier environment, if that makes sense. And so I'll retain my criteria. Crossing this road was a little bit stressful. I just used a lure in the end, but over on the other side, which Dan managed to fight his way through, we ended up on the edge of the main market, and you can see how busy it is. Lots of noisy things going past us, and she is a dab hand at dealing with all of these different things. And at this point, I'm expecting fairly good focus in this environment. She'll still look at things, but I'm not, again, goodness me, she's a really young dog. I'm not expecting her to walk through there with absolutely no things that I need to work on, no things that we need to correct, nothing. That's unrealistic. However, I know for a fact that most people's dogs, when they live in the middle of nowhere like we do, probably would struggle in this environment. And that's something that Ren's not struggling with. She's really confident. She is fine walking through very busy crowds of people. She is good at dealing with all sorts of novel things that would be quite novel things that dogs don't see every day. And so I headed up to my corner point, which I've sat on before, and just try and find a place where people can get past us quite easily, but then just wait for her to do a sit. And then, I mean, if you listen to the audio on this and you could pick out people's voices, a lot of people comment on her. Some people talk to me. Some people ask questions. I'm answering them while she's remaining in position. There's all sorts of different types of people going past. Lost her a bit there, recalled her, asked her to go back into a position. She slipped on my shoe, but she made good choices. And she's just holding in that environment really, really, really well. And because it's Beverly, there's a lot of dogs as well walking around. So we'll be able to see some dogs coming up shortly on the side. And do you know what? The best thing about this session at this specific point was that some people went past us and the kids said, "Oh, puppy." And the mum said, "Don't go say hi. Don't distract it. It's training." And I was like, "Thank you." I literally did say thank you, because I wish more people were like that. And then this lady popped up who's my nan, and I wasn't expecting that. So we cut the recording so that I could say hi to Linda. And then we went on down to do another thing that I wanted to try, which was some toy play and little baby retrieves in an urban environment, a busy environment, because this is something that she will do as an older adult. So we've got those things kind of clocked in here as well. A little bit wobbly coming down here, sorry about that. And we took out her toy. Ignore my hair. I thought it was going to be cold. It wasn't, so I didn't actually have a hat. So I'm just rocking a dodgy centre part. That's cool. But we took the toy that she got as her prize and look at her focus and engagement on that toy, and then working through I've just dropped some of the leash there so we can work on some little mini retrieves, which are working really nicely. So what I'm not doing is I've not put her in the middle of the market and do this, because first of all, I don't know, I feel like that's a little bit rude, because people are just enjoying their day on the market and they don't want to have to avoid a baby pterodactyl and some crazy lady who has no spatial awareness whilst they're doing their shopping. So instead, I go up to the corner of the market, to this pedestrianised area where there's not going to be any vehicles, where there's not many people walking, and we just do our own thing in this little bubble. And Dan's just said to a lady, "It's okay, you can walk past," before we finish up on that toy play session and then switch back into normal loose lead walk. So again, really difficult thing for a puppy to do. We learned that in loose lead walk boot camp. But this is great. So going to a coffee shop, making sure she's remembering her behaviours. Dan circles around. Obviously, she knows Dan. So she's like, "Oh, hey, Dad." And so I just reposition because I didn't ask her to break that behaviour, and Dan gets a coffee, and that's that. So then the morning after, I believe it could be that evening, but she seems like she's got like a bazillion miles of energy. So I'm going to guess this is a morning session. And so we're just working again on that positioning. And this time I'm not helping her round the corner unless I need to. So my repositioning with my legs from a side is now having her hand fairly straight. And you can see how she's really understanding that positional cue. And then I wanted to do a bit of reversing. Reversing is not a big deal for us, but it'd be nice to have. So it just helps. Again, you can position dogs like this. It's really highly engaging for dogs like this. And you can see how she's super energetic about getting into position now. I'm still very, very much helping her with that lure on the face. And this is the first time that she's actually ever seen a food bowl at our house, to be honest, as well. She got to lick the bowl afterwards, and that was a moment that I didn't get on video. Never mind. She'll have a food bowl at some point in the future, but as you guys all know, because you've followed Ren Diaries from the start, every single thing she eats is a meal. So there's no need to have a food bowl, as in everything she eats when she trains. So there's no additional treats or snacks. Everything's pulled out of a daily ration. So we know exactly how much she's eating of everything. We know she's got a complete diet. We know that all of her nutritional needs are taken care of. And she's working on that little position there, basically where she does a stop and then a go. And then coming out to work on a little bit of something with Dan. This was a session that Dan did with Ren and Piper. So Pippi, fun police. Ren knows that. Ren knows that Pippi's not going to be one to go and have a play. She does play, but it's very much on her terms. And you can see Piper's behaviour change because watch her tail. Piper's tail tells stories. Did you see that? The tail told the story the most. Also a head position, but yeah. So tails up when we're open, happy, and wanting to engage, and then if puppy gets a little bit too close, tail drops, and that's Pippi's basil brush basil brush tail. So what are we doing here, Daniel? Well, Daniel wanted to go and do some recall work with Ren around other dogs. Pippi's a good call for that, to be fair. So what they're doing is they're wandering around, and then Dan will do intermittent recalls with Ren, whilst Piper is also in the vicinity. Both dogs nailed it. Not many issues really coming through in here. So pulling a recall there, both dogs came back in. Ren presented really nicely. When Dan feeds, what he would be doing is he would be feeding her a few bits of snacks, and then he would make sure that Pippi had some as well. So just so that Pippi's not being recalled, by the way, just to clarify. So all of our dogs do cues independently. So Ren come means Ren come here, not everyone come here necessarily. But what you'll find is that dogs will pattern the behavior, so they'll come back anyway. But that was a super recall from Ren. Pippi's just like, when are you going to ask me to do something? You're all boring, go away. And so we went into another distraction training session. See, all of these are just life skills. So in this session, Dan and Beanie are at the back of the studio there. Now, Beanie's feet are like right little tippy-tappy-tap shoes. And so every time Beanie moves, she scuttles across the floor. And that in itself is quite distracting. So I'm working again off-leash with Ren as well. Just working basically on her being able to follow simple commands. So we're doing some little spins from beside the leg. Nothing that is overly difficult. It's more lure-based because that will keep her with me for a little bit longer. Just to get her brain in gear. I know that we're doing like a training session now. We're not doing like a play session now. And so just doing simple bits and pieces. So again, she's already quite distracted there. You could see that. So then it's just a case of keeping it simple. If I get to the point where I feel, do you know what, actually I've got really good focus now from the dog, then I can start potentially adding in some extra bits and pieces, either going closer to the other dog or adding a new behavior, adding distance, adding duration, adding whatever is required. You can see a couple of these things you might be watching going, why on earth have you rewarded that? There will have been a reason. Whether it's a case that the effort was really good, whether it was a case that it was an extra repetition, whether there was more duration, whether there was less of a lure, whether it was the fact that Beanie did something super distracting behind us and she didn't look. All of those things will be reasons to reward, not necessarily the fact that the behavior itself was completed perfectly that specific time. So I know what it's like watching dog training videos on the internet. There's loads of things you're like, well, why are you doing that? Or why didn't you reward then? Or why are you rewarding now? I know how it is. And there is a reason. There will be a reason. So again, gaining confidence, building a high level of reward in that position attached to my leg, which is very, very helpful with larger dogs to have a dog that's attached to your leg. I find it quite difficult, and you guys might be like, why aren't you teaching a contact heel? The reason why I'm not teaching a contact heel as a proper heel is because honestly, my balance is so bad when I'm upright that I will fall over. So that was a recall roughly. It wasn't a perfect attempt, but she made good choices. And so that was a heavy reward. So yeah, I will fall over a dog if it's in a contact heel. I just would if we were walking. If I'm stationary, we're fine. If I'm walking, we're going to be on the floor and I'll squish the dog. And that's okay. That's a normal thing. So she looked then when she came around there, but we're much closer to Beanie than we were before. And those were really, really, really good tries. So big reward. Coming down into doing some weights with a dog being busy and wiggling around. Dan's doing, I think, hand touches and unders. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I think it's just hand touches at this stage. But a lot of movement coming from the back of the room there. So the fact that she's even holding a weight at all is a really big achievement, and that's something that we can celebrate. All of this is directly useful for photography, even if it doesn't seem it. So why is this useful? Well, we might be doing work in a workshop in an urban environment at the forest, and there might be a dog running around. I don't want my dog to break the weight because there's a distraction there. So we build it up. And just because the camera was still running, we caught these little moments when me and Ren are just having a little bit of a toy to hand play. So just building the reinforcement of her actually putting the toy in my hand or bringing it closer to my hand, because again, she always gets it back and I'm not asking to have it off of her. All of these things start to add up together to build positive reinforcement between having toy plus human equals more fun, not less fun. And so that helps to build that retrieve, which she doesn't have naturally built in, like retrieving breed or something like that. So then I caught Dan doing this. Now, this behaviour is something that I taught Ren. Dan's up the ante on it, and I'll show you more on that next week. Drama llama. So filming a YouTube video. Don't worry, it'll be out soon at some point. In the background there, we will get that out over the next few weeks because Ren Diaries is ending. We're at the end, not this week, next week. And so again, just working on some little behaviors, glue stick legs, moving that lure up in this session and the next session so that there's not so much of a lure for the side. I've asked her to come into position without too much support. She struggled with it, but then she sort of worked it out and figured it out. And it wasn't a perfect presentation, but it was a really good attempt, and so we'll reward because then the next time it will be even better. And it's building confidence and knowing that you're getting the little wins moving towards good criteria. So although it might not be the way that other people train and other people might want perfect positioning criteria immediately, I work on confidence first and then correcting smaller little parts of it later on. And I mean, so far it's not really an issue. So we're good. Working on those patterns that we sort of started to talk about. I wanted to straighten her up there. She was a bit wonky. But those patterns, so it's like an under into a foos, which is a heel position on that side, that she still needs more support with. And then going from there into, for example, a close or into a walk heel or into a stay, a down. All of those chain behaviors are things that we add up. So then you only reward right at the end of all of the chain instead of having to reward every single thing. And then also you can reduce the value of the reward, or you can space out the reward, or you can add distance or duration or any one of those things. But at first it's super highly reinforcing. So these right turns, and we'll start to take out the cue. So I've just said the word, less of the hand cue, and she did really well. Went in for some middles. My reversing skills still atrocious, but I wanted to include this clip in because what you can see happen, she's done 2 there. I think she does 3 before she rolls into it. Let's see. So 3, and then the next one she goes out, watch the angle her body comes back to me. So she predicts it and she turns it already, and that's really good. That shows that she's developing some really good understanding there, so that's great. Later on that day, I'm in Dan's coat because freezing cold, and same again in principle. So we're doing some right turns, which turns her head directly towards Bryt, moving a little bit more chaotically because the tables are there now from doing that YouTube video. Bryt's already closer to us, so the distraction has moved, and we're just working on some little bits and pieces before I add a new behavior because I felt happy with her. So although it's not completely new because we're just doing the hold behavior again, what I have done is I've changed location so we make it simpler. So if the location changes, that in itself is a distraction. So simplify and then up the ante. So over the course of this session, what you'll be able to see is we'll go from me accepting just mouth on the object to only accepting mouth with a hold on the object. She went that way. I said, and she came back to me before actually engaging. Bryt, total absolute legend stooge dog when she's working, so that won't have bothered Bryt in the slightest, and it's just a case of her knowing that just because so what you want to have happen to make sure that your dog will ignore other dogs is that if 95% of the times the dog sees another dog, nothing fun happens, then you're fairly well prepared to have a dog that will ignore other dogs. And that's how it's done. Whereas if you just go to the dog park, let your dog off, and it has a hooly best time ever with 0 framework or structure on it every single time, then anytime your dog sees a dog, it's going to react because that's far more rewarding 95% of the time, if that makes any sense. So just, I don't know, principles. I don't know if these little segues into bits of theory help anybody whatsoever, but it might explain some of the behaviors your own dog does perhaps. So yeah, so waiting for a longer hold on this one. Good. I don't mind her mouthing it. Doesn't bother me. So then just working on some catches because we've got at the photography show doing lots of demos with treat catches or catches of things involved in the photo shoots. And so it'd be nice if Ren could take part, but at the moment she doesn't know how to catch. So we start like this. I literally just gently toss small treats at the head. Small treats make it much harder. So it's much easier to go with a ball. So we'll show the development of that in the next session. No, we're not allowed one. We'll manage. Good girl. Oh, is it good? Mm-hmm. 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 Are we gonna be okay? Because we don't have another clicker. We don't have a clicker again. I keep losing clickers. I mean, what can I say? So what we're not going to do is do hold behavior, something that needs a precise marker for the point at which it was good. Because the way clickers are great because it actually takes you less time to click than it does to say the word yes. And so that's one of the reasons why they're sometimes better than a marker word, but they're also much more precise. So again, working on these catches with a treat, I thought, screw it, let's get a ball. And so we work on ball, which is how most of my dogs learn to catch. So when I feel like the dog's making an attempt, i.e. they open their mouth, just maybe the timing's wrong, use a bigger object. And so I will toss very gently the ball at the dog's head. And at some point we'll have this moment, which is the best one you'll ever have. Please don't scream if your dogs haven't been proofed with you screaming and making a hoolie of noise. So me and little Red Bear were so happy. Well, I was happy. Ren was like, why are we happy? We don't know. But that was her first catch. And then after that point, she's been pretty good. So hopefully she'll be out at the photography show doing some catching demos. But who knows? She might just do basic behaviours. So coming back in again, you'll see some little bits on this clip from some sort of that toy to the hand thing. So bringing it, that was really good. That was so clever. And so those are things that we're wanting to really reinforce. And then I'm also asking for behaviors now for a toy. So asking her to go under for a toy with no handler. That was really, very, very good. And then asking her to do other little bits. So it doesn't have to be dramatic. It can just be a sit. That was a close. She went a little bit too far wrapped around, so I put her in for a foos and then a reward on that front. So normal things for me. Just normal things. And then because we're back in that original location, we can start to develop a bit of a longer hold. And because this object is really hard, it's quite difficult for her to get a nice bite. If it was softer, it would be an easier bite. But if it's too soft for a dog like this, they'll just try and take it and shred it. And so that's not something I want to be working on at the same time. So a really boring object is really good. And you'll see in the next week how this develops into a perfect hold of an object, which can be used in photography at any point. So all of the dogs also know how to hold objects like this. And it's just a case of just building up that duration, being structured and being very precise on when I click. Because that's the point when the dog knows it did the right thing. And so that develops onwards, but we need to work on some life skills. So this life skill was all about brushing. So when I first brushed Alfie, which was way too late, he was already just sliding into his fear period, which we talked about in previous weeks of Ren Diaries. And what happened was the second that brush touched him, he turned round and he put his mouth round my arm. It was a bite warning. And he looked so shocked about the whole situation because he was like, why did I do that? And I was like, it's all right, mate, don't worry about it. And we worked on counter conditioning, but I don't want to have to do that ever again. So instead we work on preparing the dog really nicely for brushing. Now, what I don't do and what I personally prefer not to do is have the dog distracted on an object like a lick-it mat, like a sticky licky, like a Kong, or another food-based item in a distraction. I prefer to train ignoring what's happening. So ignoring that the action of the brush happening. So I switched from a soft brush to a slicker brush in this session, which is much more scratchy. And then we needed to do some nail clipping. She doesn't actually really need a nails clipping, but it's just the act of holding it. So what doesn't happen at any point in this clip is Ren never pulls her leg away. What she's doing is she's trying to work out how she can get the snack from Dan, and she thought a down was the right response. So if she feels like it might work, she might shuffle backwards, but she's not at all bothered about me. I've already clipped a nail at this point before this clip started anyway, to be honest with you. And that was one that was clipped there. So she's just learning that she holds her behaviour whilst the nails are clipped, and then we fade out the food and the dog just stands to be groomed like an absolute legend that they are. And that's life skills. So another life skill is learning to deal with Dan, learning to deal with Dan's training. And as you can see, although I might make some things look easy, that doesn't mean that they're very easy for everybody else. And so Dan's just learning how to get the precise behaviors, and it's all just in the hand movement, the body language that comes from it that she's learned from me. So he just has to learn how to switch over and pattern that onto him as well. So you can see with that understanding there, if we break it down, we can see some understandings happening. And this is the point of the hand touch. So we've done hand touches, stands, and weights in position, and this is it. So it's a case of being able to micro move a dog from a different location for steps forwards to then put them in a weight, and that's the whole point. So that's that behavior complete. For me, it's just a case of patterning out different locations. And then because we just have some fun sometimes, we went out to go and test Ren's weights. So what we're doing is Dan's asking Ren to leave. He puts her in a sit. Dan then runs down the paddock a little ways. We've got some wings just to keep her straight. She holds her weight whilst Dan's running, and then he releases. And this one was good because... Oh, good girl, bless her. She went to break and then reversed herself. So really, really, really good puppy there. And then she trips over herself and falls flat on her face. Oops. See you next week for another Ren Diaries, and it'll be the last one. Sometimes.